Good afternoon, LEC community. Good evening, depending on when you're watching this. I'm Ivan Ramirez, part of the LEC team, bringing you another episode of Ask a Storyteller, a special edition of our Ask an Educator series, where we get to know educators, storytellers that are part of the LEC community. Today, I'm joined by Doctora Tatiana Bustos, a researcher, an educator, a Rising Star award recipient, and many, many, many more. How are you, Tatiana?
I'm doing great. Thank you
Mhm.
so much for having me.
No, thank you for being here with us. You are, I think, the third storyteller that we interview. So
Mhm.
we just have a few questions for our community to get to know you. Uh, yeah, tell us a little bit about you, just so we can get going.
Yeah, a little bit about me. My background: my family's from Nicaragua. I was born and raised in Miami, Florida. I'm currently living in Washington State, and I've been a researcher, a teacher, a community advocate for years. I also describe myself as a servant leader. So I really love to serve communities in different ways and trying to tell their stories in the most meaningful, culturally
Mhm.
responsive ways I can. And so my heart's in my work. So I'm just happy to be with you all today.
Yeah. Well, today we're going to talk a little bit about you and your education journey, and later on we'll get into the storytelling. But to begin, every educator has a origin story or something that lit that passion for them. What was yours? What was that moment that made you want to be in education?
I thought about this question. I had to think back to when I was at Florida International University. I was an undergrad, and I'm a first generation college student. I didn't have that guidance that others typically have, and so everything was very new. My parents didn't quite have that U.S. based guidance in terms of you do this and this to get to this step. And I remember Dr. Dion Stevens was a faculty member. She was a woman of color in the Department of Psychology, and she just took me under her wing, and I was volunteering for her as part of her lab. And she somehow saw something in me that she decided to really empower me, provide me with the training, in how to get to the next step and what are the things that you wear at a conference, small details
Yeah.
like that it wasn't so much the teaching aspect. It was more of the empowering and supportive aspect of a faculty member to be able to do that to a first generation student. And so I've always wanted to give that back to others after it having been given to me, because I remember I had come from community college, and the community college, like, they did not invest in you at all. And I remember at some point my advisor told me I wouldn't get anywhere with my grades,
Mhm.
and that was the last support system that I had transitioning from community college to university. And she just changed my world entirely. And so I love being in the space where I can teach others and give back to the communities in that way.
Yeah, I remember you mentioning that you had not a pleasant experience with teachers while you were young. Well, luckily you had those people that were in your corner when you were in higher ed, which speaks to why mentoring is important. Do you have any words to those college students that sometimes are hesitant to go seek a mentor? How did you find a mentor? Did you ask somebody, or yes, anything?
I didn't even know what a mentor was, so I didn't ask. I think it's this type of sessions and community that you all have with your network is really important, just to raise awareness. Like, you can actually have a mentor that
Mhm.
can empower you and teach you all the basic steps that you may not be getting from your direct family or your friends, just because that's not your part of your culture. And so even just building that awareness is really important through these types of sessions. And so being part of that, having a network like this that's part of the community and active in the community, is really important, because I don't think people are seeking that out. And I would say it's really the responsibility of the person. So I didn't ask her. She saw something in me. I forever am grateful that she saw potential in me, because I have never unseen that potential after she saw me. So I think it just takes that to be seen by someone in that way. And it happens a lot. And then, I feel like it's a responsibility for me to do that to someone else. And I think that's the thread that happens as it is brought onto you. And so that's what I would say.
Yeah, I think sometimes that seems intimidating too, to have an adult, a professional. Yes, but it's the total opposite. They are really down to earth, right there, walking side by side with you. Um, how do you? Yes, moving on. But how do you bring your Latino identity now in the work that you are doing?
Yeah, I think I often vacillate, right? I try to connect my identity as part of the community more broadly. So it's not just that particular space. So I serve Latinos, I serve other communities as well. But there's a lot of history that I bring and my background and my family that I try to just make part of how I do things, how I build relationships, how I connect with people, what I value as importance. And I think it more so is about the journey that they had in getting to this country and trying to enrich the opportunities that I have now moving forward. And I think that's how I try to bring my identity, Latina identity, into this space. And then there's also, I've talked about this before about having a Latina leadership identity and how that's not the same as what you might picture as a leadership identity, and trying to define that for myself, because I'm not your typical person in the room that is directing everything, and what can that look like for someone like me. And so I try to bring that into the space too, where I may not fit into certain paradigms that people want to fit me into, but I want to create something that does center who I am and what I bring. And so it's transforming, creating spaces. So that's kind of how I try to bring myself into the work.
I think I relate a little bit to that. Well, let me say, yes, maybe I'm getting it right, but I've been in spaces where I've been the only Latino there, and I seek for that representation, not realizing that I am that representation in the room. And sometimes we are the ones, unfortunately, and fortunately too. Like, yeah, it's yes, we're there to be that representation and bring others.
Yeah, creating that space for yourself and for others as well.
Yeah. I think I skipped because what do you do now? What do you do? What are you doing?
Yeah, so I do research and evaluation that focuses on creating different health systems, improving health programs so that we can have better well-being for our communities in different ways. And so that's sometimes looks like creating advisory boards. Sometimes it looks like evaluating existing programs and initiatives to get to results that people can use to drive impact. And so it's very broad what I do. I don't have a specific topic area, as long as I'm there to address a social issue or improve a certain condition. That's kind of what my work is centered around. So I do that lots.
Is there a most rewarding piece of your work, and then the most hardest piece?
Yeah, I think I love working with partners. I love working with communities as part of my work. I don't like, well, let me rephrase. I prefer working with communities in my work as opposed to doing, the desk research type of activities. I love, going out to meetings, thinking about the ideas together. And I think what community partners can bring to my work is so valuable. And I love that. I love interacting with them, just getting new ideas with them. They know so much about on the ground and what will work. And I just love that. It brings me so much joy. What's hard is trying to balance what you know is right and what you can do in the constraints that you have with everything, like project timelines, delays. Sometimes it's just the timeline doesn't work with what we need to do to invest in that relationship. And so there's often a balance to get to that heart of the work, but it's okay as long as you get to that point. So, but that's been the hardest for sure, is trying to find that balance where you want to do what's right, but you want to do it within the boundaries that you have. And so that's always hard.
No, and I agree. Most of the rewarding, being in community, learning for community is like really, really rewarding. Like hearing their perspectives of what they are doing. That resonates. I can feel that. I also moved to the U.S. when I was 15. In the town that I grew up, there was no teachers that were Latino. Only one, Miss Gomez, and I wish I could reconnect with her now. She used to say, "Mijo, you can do it. You will be fine."
Yeah.
So I still remember that. So many of us grew up without Latino teachers. And we spoke a little bit about us being that representation, but what does it mean to you be that representation of the students today?
It's a lot of pressure. But I'm motivated by that. I know that I'm entering spaces where there's not many of us, where, maybe I'm in a meeting where there hasn't, I know I've been in meetings where we're looking at a health initiative and we're not necessarily thinking about certain issues that matter for certain groups. And, I try to speak up not on behalf, but speak up to the extent that I can to advocate for what is possible to improve the well-being of Latino communities and others. And so I try to wear that, kind of wearing the heart on the sleeve. I don't know what that's saying. I wear it as a shield, knowing that I'm there for that, but it also feels like a lot of pressure sometimes, to have that, and be able to do it right for everyone. So all the Latinos that you come across, I try to meet with different people on LinkedIn too, who are just curious about my journey and how I got there. And so I'm always willing to do that, but that's a lot of time. And so it's trying to, again, find that balance where, you're not the only one, that's doing this work, and it is a collective effort for all of us to do that for each other.
How was that journey? How did you get there? Because now you're a doctora. So how was that journey? Since
Oh
yes,
my gosh, it was so hard. It was so hard. Yeah, I think it was long. We started at community college, and I had dropped out actually because I had some loss in my family and struggled getting through that. And eventually I found a way to go back, to the 4 year, the actual college program, and they let me in because I had an excruciating circumstance. And so that's
Mhm.
where I met Dr. Dion Stevens, who really helped me kind of pave a path. And she was the one that actually told me, have you ever considered, I was doing her lab. I was doing like research interviews and transcripts. And she actually asked me if I had ever considered graduate school. Before then, I never heard of it, ever. And I was like, what is that? She taught me everything about it, how to apply, how to search for programs. And I ended up going after my master's and eventually my PhD. But in between, I was doing field work with kiddos in schools for reading intervention programs. And every time I went out, it was in Spanish, it was doing Spanish assessments. Every time I went out, I realized this program is not working for this student. We need to improve the research study in some way so that we're leaving with some impact. And that brought me to the idea, okay, now I need a PhD to design this work and change how we are doing things with these communities. And so that's what really brought me to get to that point. But I had a lot of support along the way with faculty members who saw something in me, and even just teaching me, how to develop a CV. I didn't have a CV. I didn't even know what that was. I didn't know what grad school was. I didn't know what CVs were. And if it wasn't for her, I don't think I would have ever heard of that.
Yeah.
And so I always think of her, and I think of her more than she thinks of me, but I always go back to her. And then I've had other mentors along the way, but she was opened doors that I had never considered. And seeing the real world, when you are a research assistant with real world projects, doing research projects, and you're like, this isn't working for the community. I can think of something that could be better for them by just leveraging my experience. And that's what I wanted to bring, that space of the research world. And so that's what I did.
Yeah. So I want to make 2 points because I think you speak of the impact that teachers can create in students, because you said that you might think more of her, but that's
Yeah.
okay, because I bet you there's other students that's, yeah, it speaks of the impact that teachers make. And then the other thing is dropping out is okay. Sometimes
Yes.
we mind dropping out is okay, and I think there's a statistic that people also switch majors, and that's okay also.
Yes.
Everybody's in a different timeline, in their own journey. And I don't know if you have anything to say about that, but I just want to say that you shouldn't be ashamed to people that are watching, ashamed or feel any type of anything that you are thinking of dropping out or slowing down.
Yeah, I mean, I agree completely. I just share that to show that exact point. It
Mhm.
doesn't stop. It doesn't make you seem like something's wrong with you. There are opportunities. Those opportunities are always there for you to pick back up.
Mhm.
And I like to share that because I want to show that that path is always there for you to pick back up.
Yeah.
It took me, I think I took a 2-year break around then, and then I actually transitioned back. And so, yeah, it's nothing to be ashamed about. And, I think I'm more proud of being able to navigate that and doing what's right, what I needed in the moment to
Mhm.
step away.
Yeah. Is there a moment that told you, "Hey, I need to keep going," or yeah, was there a moment that you're like, "Oh no, but I need to keep going"? Why? What was that? That
Sure,
went
there
on
was,
with?
and I
Yeah.
can't remember. I know that, once I had the family loss, I kind of felt
Mhm.
lost, and I didn't quite know what to do. And I think I tried different things, and at some point, I had 3 jobs, and I was like, I need to find something else. And I think that's kind of the breaking point where I decided to go back and
Mhm.
figure out another path to get to
Yeah.
the college.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing all of those. I want to get into our expression, a conversation.
Okay. Okay.
You were part of the fourth cohort, and we're preparing for the fifth, starting next year. And we have a reunion coming up this Saturday, so
Yeah.
hopefully we'll see you there. But looking back at the Expression Storytelling Fellowship, and for those who don't know, LEC has an Expression Storytelling Fellowship, a Storytelling Fellowship. About 3 months, we meet every other week with our wonderful collaborator Luis Ortega from Storytellers for Change. And in there, we go through a process of shaping our stories that we want to share or not share with others. But looking back at the Expression Storytelling Fellowship, has it shaped the way that you tell your story today?
Yes. Yes, it completely changed my mindset about storytelling. I didn't realize how hard it was. I know you know this, but it was very, very difficult. And I still reflect on it to this day. I just shared something recently, and I connected back to this story, what I learned through this storytelling fellowship. And I also remembered, when I was younger, my father actually used to tell me stories. So, before bedtime. So we weren't a family that he would get books and
Mhm.
read to me. He would tell me, he would make up stories right in the moment about friends that he had in his village. It was like a cyclops, a thief, and a poet. And it was always those 3 characters that he would tell me. And I used to beg for him to tell me those stories every day. And so I love that ability to be able to share stories like that spoke to our his growing up in Nicaragua. And that was his way of telling me about his culture. And so I learned so much about those fake friends, those imaginary friends, through those stories. And I wanted to bring that back because I don't do that. I learned to not share stories. And I think what that fellowship really taught me was how expression was just so eye-opening in terms of finding the strengths in the stories that we bring, and not necessarily centering the trauma or the challenge, but really what modeled us to get to the strengths that we have today. But it also challenged me in being more vulnerable,
Yes. Yes.
and but wearing that proudly. Usually I'm scared of being vulnerable. I don't want to do that today, and sometimes I didn't. But seeing others do that was very inspiring, and others did it way better than me, I think. And just wearing that vulnerability proudly. And I think that I also learned that through watching others do expression, and it made me realize how core, how at the core stories are to who you are and who you've come to be to this day. And so when I share my stories now, I think about that. I think about that vulnerability and the authenticity of doing it. It's not just Like I just didn't think about the complexities of it. Now I know that when we tell our stories, it's just so deep and authentic, and there's an actual connection that's being established through one another. And I really appreciated that.
Yeah, there's a process. I didn't realize either. I went through it, yeah, a couple, several years back. And there's a framework, there's a process, and yeah, it makes you remember things that you might not remember, or
Right.
sometimes you don't remember things, and you
Mhm.
want to remember those things. Yeah.
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 I'm definitely the person that's, I just move forward. Like I'm never in the moment. And I think this forced us to be in the moment and take that pause and think back to those stories. So that was great. I needed that.
Yeah. I also love the community. We were completely online for 3 months,
Yeah.
but you felt that the community was being built. The
Mhm.
support, the feedback that we got from one another, like it was real, even though we were separated by the screen.
Yeah. Great fellows. My gosh. And so talented and awesome storytellers. I mean, I couldn't, it's just amazing. It all came together very well. Very well.
Mhm. So, have you told any stories ever since the fellowship? And have, yeah, or are you working on any new stories?
I have not, well, I had to think about this question. So I always share the story of what I just told you a little bit earlier about
Hmm.
being a field assistant, doing lots of reading development assessments, and working with kids. And so the story is that when I would go out to these schools, do the assessments in Spanish. So the whole idea behind the reading intervention is that it was designed to improve reading performance for English language learners. And I would do the assessments in English and Spanish. And I remember going to the classroom. There was a Spanish speaking young student in elementary school, and she was so bright and understood everything like with comprehension, with spelling. And I realized that she was being categorized in a group that was underperforming because she was transitioning. She had just come to the country. She hadn't had the time to transition into an English speaking class. And I remember thinking, this is the issue with developing reading intervention programs, and don't think about the broader context of schools, resources, policies, and we end up miscategorizing certain students and community. More other communities as well face this, and it just made me think about how I want to address that and serve those groups with the impact that I can through the work that I do. And so I just shared that story earlier with someone, and I share it because that was like the transition period for me to come into this space of doing this type of work. And I just always think back. So that's a story that I like to share, and that I shared recently that
Hmm.
resonates with me and continues to resonate with me.
Yeah, yeah. No, but it was really impactful for those people. I remember also being an ESL student and having to be in those spaces, and you have to do testing in English while
Yeah.
learning English. And like, wait, I'm more smarter than this, but I just can't understand
Yes.
the language. Yes.
Yeah, and it's not a one fits all approach, one size fits all approach, but it's really the approach that you take to understand what that student needs, and that's the space that I want to be in, trying
Mhm.
to build that understanding so that we have good programs.
And we need people like you in those spaces, especially now in the world that we live in.
Mhm.
How the world is changing. Like we need more
Yeah,
Doctora, yeah, Bustos in those spaces. Yeah,
yeah, totally.
to
Hmm.
yeah to create space for us to yeah, yes. Okay, and my next question, I can never say this word, but I bet you I'm going to be able to say it by the end of the series when I interview all the storytellers. But storytelling often involves vulnerability. Oh, there, vulnerability.
Yay.
How do you decide what parts to tell and what parts to keep to yourself?
Yeah, so I agree. Storytelling is all about vulnerability, and I I actually I've thought about this, and I wrote down something, because one thing I did want to say is that this is when we tell stories, it's actually tied to our positionality. So the identities, the social identities that we hold, which are so many, right? We're Latino, we have all these other identities that are salient to us. And it shapes who we are, and it also shapes how we act based on who we're with. And I think that is inclusive of our stories, right? The storytelling piece. And so what I did write down is that when I think about this question, I thought about how oftentimes it's a privilege to be able to choose which stories to tell. And some of us are often in this in-between space. There's this there's this ethnography concept called insider-outsider identity, where the insider identity is what you share, the commonalities, the common identities that you share. And then the outsider identities are the different identities that are distinct from the dominant group. And then there's this concept of outsider within, when you're in between. You're kind of standing in this in-between space where you're both and or. And if you're in that in between, like being a Latina in a space where you're the only one representing those groups, you often don't have that freedom to choose which ones to express, which stories to tell, which acts, behaviors to carry out. And oftentimes you're dictated by the setting or the culture. And so I just wanted to emphasize that too. Like sometimes sharing our stories isn't really our choice. And there's a balance there, because I often share what I can based on who I'm with, where I'm at, even just the environmental context. Is it the right place or not? And I think about that, when you ask the question, how do you make a decision about what to share or not? And I think we often are doing that, but not at our will. But I just wanted to share that.
Not at the fullest, and it goes back to the vulnerability piece also. How
Yeah.
vulnerable you want to be in that setting.
Right.
Yes, it goes. Okay, it might relate to my next question. How vulnerable you want to be in this question? But what is the relation of grief and healing?
Yeah, so I shared this as part of the fellowship because one of the stories that I was focusing in on had to do with grief and had to do with healing. And I think the point that I was trying to get to is that I started in this period of grief, and coming back to that point led me to that process of healing. I think that's the connection there. And I don't know if it was you who said this, but it's like the exact opposites of one another, but they're actually connected in a very deep way. And I still think that's possible, because I can still hold grief. I actually, if you can believe it, I don't hold as much as I did when we were meeting. And so I actually do feel more healing since then. And I do think that expressing it outwardly was really helpful. But I think I still carry it. And so when I say that, they're both together and intersecting, it's really a balance between the two. But I always think they're both present. I don't think you can ever stop grieving for something so deep as I've felt.
No, no, no. Especially, yeah, that relationship you had. No, it will. Yeah, it shows the love you've had, the connection you've had. Yeah, you mentioned that was your person that you were the most connected with.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes. No, thank you for sharing a little bit of that piece. I recently got a tattoo, and I think it relates to grief. It's a bunny. I don't know.
Okay. Tell me about it.
When I was a kid, my mom and she's still alive, but I think it will relate to grief later on. But it will always be in my arm. She would tell me, "Go to the back. There's a conejito," before she would go to work.
Yeah.
So she wouldn't see me cry, so I would go and look for the conejito every day. The conejito was never there, the bunny. So I got it here, and I think, yeah, in the future it will mean something different. But right now it's a happy memory. Yeah.
Beautiful.
And it's that part, yeah, the grief and the healing. Yeah.
And always remind you. You always have that memory.
I always have that memory. We're almost near the end. Do you have any advice for somebody that is thinking of telling their story, and they might think that the story is not big enough or important enough? What can you tell them?
Yeah, I think. Okay, so in our culture, I'll speak for myself. In my culture, we tend to not share our stories. We're not proud people. We don't share out what we're doing. Like, if we're sharing something, it's just expected. And I've never thought that my story was that important. And, I had to really work hard to challenge that. And I never was shown that. And what I will say to others is that no one has heard your story, and that whatever you have experienced is so unique and so powerful. And I think that sharing it, even with that one person, like that faculty member that I mentioned, maybe she has no idea who I am, and her noticing me changed my life. And you
Mhm.
could be that person by sharing your experiences, your stories in that way, where you just change that person's life. I really believe that. I really believe that doing that can lead to that level of impact to others, even if it's not someone who looks like you, but maybe it's
Yeah.
just someone who just needed to hear that. And I think just it doesn't need to be a big story. It just needs to be your story. And I think that's always worth sharing.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. We are at time. I just want to thank you for being here with us. It went by fast.
No, it was really fast.
Yeah, yeah. So hopefully we'll see you soon. Keep in touch. It was great having you in the storytelling fellowship, and hopefully you continue to be part of the LEC community. Any last words?
Oh gosh, thank you so much.
Yeah.
I love talking to you, and I think what you're doing is great. This is such an important program, and I'm just so grateful that I got to meet you all. And I will stay connected for
Okay.
sure.
We'll talk to you soon.
All right,
Adios.
thank you. Adios.
Bye.